There's a quiet shift happening to men in their 30s, and almost nobody's talking about it. More and more men are slowly pulling away from relationships, not because they hate love, not because they stopped caring, but because something inside them got exhausted, completely exhausted. Why men in their 35s are quietly giving up on relationships isn't just a title anymore. For a lot of men, it's becoming real life. And the craziest part? Most people totally misunderstand why it's happening. In this video, we're going to uncover what's really going on beneath the surface. The pressure, the silence, the emotional burnout most men never talk about out loud. So if you're a guy trying to understand yourself, or just trying to make sense of the modern world around you, subscribe to the channel right now, because this channel was built for men who want clarity, purpose, and emotional strength in a world that rarely understands them. And help us hit our goal of 1,000 subscribers, because having you as part of this community genuinely means something. Topic 1. Men were told relationships would bring peace, but many found pressure instead. For most men, relationships were sold almost like the finish line. Since they were kids, they kept hearing the same message over and over again. Work hard, become successful, find the right woman, and life will finally feel peaceful. Like everything would finally fall into place. And honestly, a lot of men believed that. They imagined coming home after a long day and finally feeling understood, respected, appreciated. Not perfection, just peace. But somewhere along the way, a lot of men quietly realized something felt off. The peace they expected somehow started feeling more like pressure. By the time a man reaches his mid-30s, he's carrying things most people never really see. Bills, expectations, responsibilities, silent fears about the future, all sitting on his shoulders every single day. And weirdly enough, most men don't even complain about the weight itself. What drains them is feeling like they can never put the weight down, like they always have to perform, always have to stay strong, always have to provide emotional stability while barely having any themselves. A lot of men entered relationships hoping they'd become a place where they could emotionally recharge, but instead, they sometimes felt like another place where failure wasn't allowed. And little by little, something dangerous starts happening. The man who used to feel hopeful becomes emotionally careful. He talks less, explains less, expects less understanding. Maybe he still shows up physically, still goes to work, still replies to texts, still smiles during dinner. But internally, he slowly starts disconnecting from the dream he once had about love. Because when someone spends years feeling like their value only comes from being useful, eventually they start wondering if anybody would still choose them without the performance. And that quiet question slowly opens the door to something even deeper. Topic 2. Modern dating feels like constant performance. At some point, dating stopped feeling natural for a lot of men. It started feeling more like a job interview mixed with a marketing campaign. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to simply be a good man anymore. Now he also had to be confident, successful, emotionally intelligent, ambitious, funny, physically attractive, financially stable, and socially validated, all at once. And sure, self-improvement matters. But many men quietly reached a point where they no longer felt loved for who they actually were. They felt evaluated based on how well they performed. Social media made this pressure even worse. Every scroll became another reminder that somebody out there was richer, taller, better looking, more charismatic, traveling more, making more money, living a better life. Dating apps turned people into profiles competing for attention in a marketplace where first impressions last about 2 seconds. A man could spend years building discipline, loyalty, and character, and still feel invisible because he didn't fit into a few perfect photos on a screen. And after enough rejection or silence, many men stopped taking it personally on the outside, while internally, it slowly chipped away at their confidence. What makes this so exhausting is that most men never openly talk about it. They joke about it, brush it off, say things like, "It is what it is," while carrying frustration they can't fully explain. Because deep down, Many started feeling like relationships became less about connection and more about nonstop competition. And competition feels exciting for a while, until a man realizes he's been competing for so long that he barely remembers what genuine peace even feels like anymore. That's usually when emotional distance quietly starts turning into emotional protection. Topic 3. Many men no longer feel emotionally safe. One of the biggest lies many men grew up believing is that vulnerability automatically creates deeper connection. So eventually, some of them tried. They opened up about stress, fear, insecurity, childhood wounds, financial pressure, anxiety about the future, things they had buried for years. And for a moment it probably felt freeing, like finally taking the armor off after wearing it for decades. But for a surprising number of men, that moment didn't lead to safety. It led to feeling exposed, misunderstood, sometimes even judged in ways they never forgot. A lot of men can remember the exact moment they started emotionally shutting down. Maybe it happened during an argument where their weakness got used against them. Maybe it was the subtle feeling of losing respect after showing pain. Or maybe it was realizing that people loved the strong version of them, but had no idea what to do with the struggling version. And the scary part is that most men never announce this shift out loud. They just quietly adapt. They stop saying what's really going on. They replace honesty with humor. Distance starts feeling safer than disappointment. Over time, this creates a man who looks emotionally calm on the outside, but feels strangely disconnected on the inside. He still functions, still works, still shows up, but he no longer feels completely safe being emotionally seen by anyone. And once a man starts associating love with emotional risk instead of emotional peace, something inside him slowly changes. He begins protecting himself, not only from pain, but also from closeness itself. And without realizing it, that emotional survival instinct starts affecting every relationship that comes after. Topic 4. The loneliness nobody talks about. One of the strangest things about being a man in his 30s is how easy it becomes to disappear emotionally without anybody noticing. A man can have co-workers, family, gym buddies, group chats, even casual relationships, and still feel deeply alone. Because loneliness for many men isn't about being physically isolated. It's about feeling like nobody truly sees what's happening inside them. Somewhere after their late 20s, a lot of male friendships quietly become surface level. Conversations turn into jokes, sports, work, memes, quick updates, but rarely anything real. And honestly, many men don't even realize how emotionally isolated they've become until life hits them hard. A breakup, losing a parent, financial stress, burnout. Suddenly they look around and notice they don't actually have many places where they can fully fall apart without feeling weak. Women are often encouraged to emotionally process together. Men are usually taught to privately survive. So instead of talking, they distract themselves. More work, more scrolling, more drinking, more hours at the gym, more silence, anything to avoid sitting alone with thoughts they were never taught how to handle. The dangerous part is that loneliness changes the way a man sees relationships over time. At first, he still hopes connection will come eventually. But after enough years feeling emotionally unsupported, some men stop expecting understanding altogether. They start convincing themselves they don't really need anyone. And on the surface, that can even look like strength, independence, control. But deep down, many are simply adapting to emotional starvation for so long that numbness begins feeling normal. And once a man gets comfortable emotionally surviving alone, the next shift becomes even harder to notice. Topic 5. Social media changed male self-worth. A lot of men don't realize how much social media has quietly changed the way they see themselves. Years ago, a man mostly compared himself to people in his own town, workplace, or social circle. Now, every single day, he's exposed to thousands of carefully edited lives. Men with perfect bodies, luxury apartments, expensive watches, beautiful girlfriends, huge businesses, endless confidence. And even when he logically knows most of it is curated, part of his brain still absorbs the comparison. Slowly, repeatedly, like water dripping on stone. For many men in their 30s, this creates a strange kind of invisible anxiety. They start feeling behind in life even when they're actually doing okay. A man can have a decent career, pay his bills, stay disciplined, treat people well, and still feel like he's losing some race nobody officially announced. Suddenly, normal life starts feeling unimpressive, and that pressure leaks into relationships too. Because when a man secretly feels inadequate, he often starts believing he has to overachieve just to deserve love, respect, or attention. That's an exhausting way to live without even realizing it. What makes this even more dangerous is that many men suffer through this silently, while pretending they're unaffected. They laugh at social media, say they don't care, act emotionally detached, but their nervous system tells a different story. Constant comparison slowly rewires how they measure their value, not by peace, not by character, not by loyalty, but by status, appearance, income, and external validation. And after years of chasing those things without feeling internally fulfilled, some men begin wondering whether relationships themselves are even worth the emotional pressure anymore. That question is usually where deeper emotional fatigue begins turning into emotional burnout. Topic 6. Some men are exhausted from being needed but never understood. A lot of men spend their entire adult lives becoming useful. Useful at work, useful in relationships, useful to family, useful during emergencies. From the outside, that sounds honorable. And in many ways, it is. But there's a hidden cost to always being the reliable one. Because over time, many men begin feeling like their value exists only in what they can provide, fix, solve, or carry. People celebrate the man who sacrifices himself for everyone else, but very few stop to ask what that constant pressure is doing to him internally. By the time many men reach their mid-30s, they're mentally tired in ways they don't even know how to explain. They wake up already thinking about responsibilities, mortgage payments, career pressure, aging parents, future uncertainty, relationship expectations. And the strange thing is, most men were never taught how to emotionally process stress. They were taught how to endure it. So instead of slowing down, they just keep pushing. More hours, more discipline, more self-control. Like a machine that keeps running long after the warning lights started flashing. Eventually, exhaustion stops feeling temporary and starts becoming part of their identity. And this is where many men quietly begin emotionally withdrawing from relationships without fully realizing it. Not because they stopped caring, but because deep down, they no longer know where they're allowed to rest. A man can love deeply and still feel emotionally drained by constantly being needed, especially if he secretly feels that nobody truly understands the pressure he carries behind closed doors. Sometimes what a man wants most isn't admiration, status, or even success. Sometimes he just wants one place in life where he doesn't have to perform, solve problems, or stay emotionally guarded all the time. And when he can't find that place, something inside him slowly starts shutting down. Topic 7. Casual culture left many men emotionally empty. For years, modern culture sold men a very specific idea of freedom. No commitment, no emotional attachment, no responsibility. Just endless options, casual connections, and complete independence. And at first, a lot of men genuinely believed that lifestyle would make them happy. It felt exciting, lightweight, simple, no vulnerability, no emotional risk, just temporary experiences and surface-level connection. But what many men slowly discovered over time is that human beings can distract themselves for years without actually feeling fulfilled. And eventually, silence has a way of exposing what distractions were hiding. A man can spend years mastering detachment without realizing he's also losing his ability to deeply connect. That's the part nobody talks about enough, because emotional numbness rarely arrives all at once. It happens gradually, through short-term relationships, through avoiding difficult conversations, through treating connection like something replaceable. And the strange thing is, many men don't notice the damage while life is moving fast. It usually hits later, maybe in the middle of the night, maybe after another empty interaction, maybe when they realize they have people around them, but nobody who truly knows them deeply. By the time some men reach their mid-30s, they start feeling a conflict they never expected. Part of them still wants freedom, peace, simplicity, but another part quietly craves something real, something emotionally grounding, someone they don't have to perform around. And that internal conflict can be brutal, because modern culture trained many men to associate emotional dependence with weakness. So instead of admitting they feel empty, they often retreat even further into isolation, work, routines, or distractions. But deep down, many are beginning to realize that avoiding emotional pain also means avoiding emotional connection. And eventually, that realization forces a man to confront questions he can no longer outrun. Topic 8. Men in their 35s start questioning everything. Something happens to many men in their mid-30s that's difficult to explain unless they've lived through it themselves. Life starts getting quieter externally, but louder internally. The distractions that once worked don't hit the same anymore. The excitement fades faster. The routines begin feeling repetitive, and for the first time in years, many men start asking themselves questions they spent most of their lives avoiding. Is this really the life I wanted? Why do I still feel empty after achieving so much? When was the last time I genuinely felt alive? Those questions can shake a man more than failure ever could. This stage often looks confusing from the outside because the man may actually seem successful. Stable job, responsibilities handled, maybe even physically healthier than before. But internally, he starts realizing that survival and fulfillment are not the same thing. A lot of men spent their entire 20s and early 30s chasing goals without ever stopping to ask whether those goals would emotionally satisfy them once they arrived. Society teaches men how to build a life, but not necessarily how to emotionally live inside it. And eventually, a man notices that achieving more doesn't automatically heal exhaustion, loneliness, or emotional disconnection. For some men, this becomes a turning point. They begin reevaluating relationships, purpose, identity, even masculinity itself. But for others, something more dangerous happens instead. Emotional shutdown. They stop expecting excitement from life, stop hoping for deep connection, stop believing real understanding is possible. And the scary part is that this emotional numbness can look incredibly calm from the outside, responsible, mature, unbothered. But internally, many men are quietly wrestling with the fear that life may continue exactly like this for the next 30 years. And when that thought settles in deeply enough, it changes the way a man approaches love, connection, and even himself. Topic 9. The real reason some men quietly give up. When people hear that some men are giving up on relationships, they often assume it comes from bitterness, anger, or resentment. But honestly, for many men, it's something far quieter than that. It's exhaustion, emotional exhaustion that built slowly over years. Years of feeling pressure to perform, years of hiding stress, years of trying to stay emotionally strong while secretly feeling disconnected, unseen, or replaceable. Most men didn't wake up one morning suddenly deciding they no longer believed in love. For many, it happened gradually, one disappointment at a time. And what makes this difficult to notice is that men often suffer very differently from women emotionally. Many don't cry publicly. They don't always vent to friends. They don't post emotional breakdowns online. Instead, they become quieter, more distant, more focused on work, routines, distractions, or isolation. They still function normally, which makes people assume they're fine. But internally, some men begin emotionally shutting doors one by one, not because they hate connection, but because they stopped believing connection will truly feel safe, peaceful, or lasting for them personally. The real tragedy is that many of these men still deeply want love. They still want loyalty, still want emotional closeness, still want someone they can fully relax around without constantly feeling judged, tested, or emotionally guarded. But after enough emotional fatigue, hope itself starts feeling dangerous, because hope requires vulnerability, and vulnerability starts feeling expensive after enough disappointment. So instead of risking more emotional pain, Some men quietly convince themselves they're better off alone. And once a man reaches that emotional state long enough, rebuilding his belief in connection becomes far more difficult than most people realize. Conclusion. Maybe the saddest part about all of this is that many men never truly wanted to give up on love in the first place. They just got tired of carrying emotional weight in silence for so long. And if there's one thing this video should remind you of, it's this. Becoming emotionally numb is not the same thing as becoming emotionally strong. A man can survive alone for years and still quietly crave peace, understanding, loyalty, and real connection deep down inside. The question is, how long can someone ignore those needs before they stop recognizing themselves completely? And honestly, how many men around you right now are silently going through this without anybody noticing? So now I want to hear from you. Do you think modern relationships are emotionally exhausting for men today? Have you ever felt yourself slowly disconnecting emotionally without even realizing it? Or do you think men are simply adapting to a changing world? Drop your thoughts in the comments because conversations like this matter more than most people realize. A lot of men have spent years believing they were completely alone in these feelings. And maybe they're not. And if this video connected with you in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This channel is for men who are tired of shallow advice and want deeper conversations about masculinity, purpose, relationships, discipline, emotional strength, and modern life. We're building a strong community together, and we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So if you want more content that genuinely understands what a lot of men silently go through, be part of this journey with us.